Bright and early, we're back, of course, to the midweek edition of the program, The Morning Brief, right here on Channels Television. We're reaching you from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma.
3 days to the end of August, Jeffrey.
Oh, you're counting.
3 days.
You've taken the baton.
Good morning and welcome to The Breakfast Show, The Morning Brief. I'm Cardiovascular. Yes, I'm counting, Jeffrey, and as expected. Yeah. Because, August is one of those months that you love to have around, but then after August comes the will I call it flood rains or whatever, what have you? Because there's a lot of
nature's wrath, if you will,
on that side, and then there's the economic part because people's holidays would usually end in September. Summer ends in September. Resumption is in September. So all of that rest, all of that rest looks like it just thins away in September at the end of August. So that's why I'm counting down, like a lot of people. Are you counting down too?
I'm also counting down, given the fact, I don't know whether I should count down, I should just hold my peace or manage my expectations. Yeah. Remember the Dangote refinery and the NNPCL had initially said they'll give us PMS sometime. Now they've moved it to September. So we will start another round of counting again. So, we're saying it here. I even had to post on X. I said, when we heard that the NNPCL will, I said it will shift again to September, I had to scream and say, hey, Mele Kyari, GCEO, I hope this is not true. Eventually, of course, it was true. And we hope that September will be the month we will not be waiting again. Now, there are two promises made, Kyari. Nigerians are holding on to one, but I'm holding on to two. Promise number one is a popular one, that they'll start rolling out PMS from the Port Harcourt refinery. And that's what they promised. December, he said, will be net exporter of petroleum products. So as soon as he passes one, we'll go to the next one. So our job, NNPCL, is to remind you of what you said. So that, because if you fail in what you said, we'll clearly say you're lying and we'll not be saying anything out of the ordinary. Because that's our cash cow. Yeah. Just like those of us who are in the media sitting here, we have what we call the camera one. This one is the most important camera that should never go off, even if all the cameras. So this camera one, as far as oil and gas is concerned and our economy is concerned, oil and gas is our camera one, at least for now, until we diversify our economy well enough to say, if oil comes, fine. If it doesn't come, for now, we're not that buoyant to, look away. That's why our eyes and our ears are always on the petroleum industry.
Absolutely. So a lot is tied to the availability of petrol or otherwise, you can tell. The queues are still there. We've asked time and again, is this going to be our new norm? So you understand why a lot of people are looking to the Port Harcourt refinery. Aside the fact that this is just basic. I mean, this is what we're meant to have in our country as a major producer of crude oil. It's a no-brainer. Aside that is the fact that, of course, it's going to improve, or it's expected to improve economic indices. But again, it's important to manage expectations, right? So all of this back and forth, some think it's predicated on what might happen eventually in the market. Some say that the marketers are holding off and seeing if there'll be a price crash when those products are rolled out. But whatever, the products should be rolled out. But Jeffrey, another thing that is vital to Nigeria's economy is bread.
Yeah, bread.
And you heard what NAFDAC had to say about the video going online that claiming that NAFDAC is advising against consumption of bread produced in Nigeria. And NAFDAC had to say, no.
That's not what we're saying.
That's not what we said.
Misinterpreted what we said.
Exactly. It didn't quite reflect what happened at that meeting because Nigerians love their bread.
I love my bread.
Exactly. So imagine how a lot of people received that. I know some people will not even listen to it, whether or not that was what was said. They will not even agree. They will still consume bread. But NAFDAC had to say, well, yes, we don't allow saccharin in Nigerian bread. And I think it's important for NAFDAC to go even beyond putting out that statement and saying, well, we didn't advise against consumption of bread in Nigeria because you have factories doing well. I need them to also go beyond that and begin to do like a recheck. Because there was that time, Jeff, remember, where there was a lot of, clamp down on people using bromate and what have you. And I think
that was quite an era.
Yeah, I think it was controlled to a large extent, but I'm not sure that is still being implemented now. Because now that prices are quite high in terms of flour, butter, all of the ingredients used, sugar used for bread, there's a tendency that you may have some people actually engaging in sharp practices using some of these ingredients. So I would love to see NAFDAC going out there. It was good to see what they did with some of those drinks then. But I think they have to actually go out there and begin to do the rechecks again, because some people may have dropped the ball.
At the end of the day, it's important. You're talking about quality and all of that, and it's important right now because of how expensive things are in the country. Bread that are quote unquote affordable are literally suspect. I remember I used to buy the bread I eat has gone up by almost 100%.
Right.
Some other bread maybe more than that. So when you look at some of the prices and you go to the market and you see any bread that is like 500 naira, you're like, is this really? That used to be good bread before now. Now you're buying bread that used to buy 300, 500 for like 1,000, 800,
1,500,
800,
2,000.
There's one bread I used to buy for like 359. It's a 6,000.
There you go. What is that? Gold in the bread?
No.
Gold shipping.
No, there are different types of bread. It depends on what
I
you want.
know.
But at the end of the day, it's about just helping Nigerians to live a better life. I think we'll continue to say that Nigerians have been patient well enough, but that's not all we're talking about. We'll talk the economy. We'll talk about a range of issues today on the program. But first, let's bring you the very first thing we'll be discussing today. Has to do with its GDP growth, closely followed by that marginal drop in inflation. Nigeria's gross domestic product has grown by 3.19% year on year. But how will these numbers translate into improved living standards for Nigerians? Ordinary Nigerians, we must say. An economist will give his interpretation of the facts behind the figures.
Absolutely. And of course, we talk sports this morning. Nigerians don't just love their bread, they love their football. Yes, so whether you agree that Nigeria is a footballing nation or not, we don't take chances with outcomes and results because, of course, it affects our polity, culture, commerce, and our emotions. So today on the program, we examine what's ahead of our new coach, Bruno Labbadia. There's been a lot of talk about his performance, his pedigree, what have you, but what is behind all of those figures? Who is the man? What should we expect from him? We'll find out.
Well, we will also switch gears. This is related to sports in a way, but health to be precise. Your cardiovascular health is critical to the quality of your life. And the experts will be here to break down what you may have been doing wrongly that may have endangered your life and how to make a better turn so that you and I can live even a better and more productive life. So it's a packed show for us to have a proper conversation from the economy to sport to health right here on the Morning Brief.
Jeffrey, that's what they call full package.
Yeah.
Total package. So here's what we'll do.
Bumper package.
Right. You miss Bukola, don't you? Head over to social media right now. Hashtag CTV Morning Brief. Be a part of this conversation, really, because it's a very important one, from the economy, which you feel, to your health, and of course, sports. And your comments are up in about 15 minutes. So hashtag CTV Morning Brief, or just head over to WhatsApp. Send us your comments, your videos, and we'll take them. We have a backlog from yesterday from the conversation around education, which will be taken as well today. So be a part of the show. Let your voice be heard. If you've got videos, send them our way. We are big on what's happening around you, because this is also a community show.
And don't just give up on things. Try to talk to us on this platform, like Kada said, WhatsApp X, because I realize sometimes when things are so tough and Nigerians all of a sudden become quiet, they are just exhausted, to gather some more momentum and come back again to continue the fight. Take that fight to Twitter, former Twitter, now X, bring it to WhatsApp, send your videos and messages. Our job is simple. We will amplify it so that the people in power will know they have a big job on their hands. But we'll take the top stories after this break, and we'll be back to talk about the things you will love us to talk about right here on the program. Join us again. Top on the brief this morning is a hint by the Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Finidi George, that there is no timeline for the implementation of the Stephen Oronsaya's report on restructuring of the MDAs. That update came to our attention during an interview after a working visit to the headquarters of the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative in Abuja. Mr. Gbajabiamila, however, debunks claims of the report being, that is being stalled, explaining that government is working out modalities to ensure a smooth run of the policy when implemented. Mr. Steve Oronsaya's report recommends the reduction of statutory agencies from 263 to 161, as well as abolition of about 38 agencies, the merger of 52, and the reversion of 14 to departments in ministries. In the meantime, President Bola Tinubu is set to visit China in the first week of September, just a few days from now. The special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajirin Galali, says the President will meet with President Xi Jinping and several memorandum of understanding and agreements will be signed. The President will also attend the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit, where he will be representing ECOWAS and discuss regional peace and security. Now let's talk party politics, where the Labour Party has vowed to discipline erring members. Let's also tell you that the National Working Committee of the Labour Party says it will discipline any member that disrespects the party's constitution and its leadership. Addressing a news conference against the backdrop of a recent engagement with Governor Alex Otti of Abia State, the party's national chairman, Mr. Julius Abure, maintains that Labour Party has no leadership vacuum and therefore faults the governor's plans to convene a national conference to set up a caretaker committee. Mr. Abure maintains that the party will discipline any member who disrespects the party's constitution and its leadership, no matter how highly placed the person may be.
The national leadership hereby states unequivocally that there is no vacuum in the leadership of the party. B, conscious of the fact that the tenure of the executives was to last till June 2024, the national convention of the party was held in March 27, 2024 at Nnewi, Anambra State. The National Working Committee also notes that assuming, without conceding, that the tenure of the current National Working Committee has even expired, we must state clearly that it is not the responsibility of Dr. Alex Otti as governor of Abia State to convene a NEC meeting for the purposes of setting up a caretaker committee. The National Working Committee of the Labour Party urges all members of the party to play by the rules, pay respect to the national leadership of the party. The party will not hesitate henceforth to discipline any member of the party, however highly placed, who is not ready to obey the constitution of the party and indeed obey the lawful directive of the leadership of the party.
Well, it appears a crisis in the Labour Party. There's no end in sight. And it would be nice to have Mr. Abure have us to talk about this on television. But let's move away from politics to health, where the United States Agency for the International Development, you said, has donated 10,000 Mpox genus vaccine to Nigeria. At the official handover, the Director General of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Muyi Aina, says the distribution of the vaccine will commence immediately, and priority will be given to states with the highest cases and frontline workers. He appreciated the U.S. government for the support and pledge to the judicious use of the vaccines. So far, Nigeria has confirmed 40 cases of Mpox, as it's called, across 36 states of the Federation. 33 states of the Federation, I should say.
What we are going to be doing with that is to prioritize where we deploy them based on where the need and the impact will be greatest. Because of the nature of the virus and how it is transmitted, it is through contact and exposure to sick people. We believe our frontline health workers are at particular risk. We are also going to prioritize states that have had the highest number of cases. Many of them are in the south, but of course we're going to have to work with the states to develop state-specific plans, to make sure that the vaccine is appropriately deployed.
Let's stay with health. The Lagos State government has announced that there is no active case of Mpox in the state, but it is concerned about the air, sea, and border travelers who may bring the disease into the state. This is according to the Commissioner for Health, Professor Akiabayomi, who made this comment during a press briefing in Lagos. He says, aside from body contact transmission, sexual transmission is also on the rise with the declared IB variant spreading in Central Africa.
Lagos does not have any active Mpox cases at the moment. We are not concerned about the local Mpox strain. We are rather more concerned about the new mutation in Central Africa that is causing some problem there. We are concerned that there is a possibility that this new strain, Clade 1B, may find its way into Lagos by virtue of the multiple airline links between Lagos, Rwanda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have a lot of trading links with these countries. Nigerians go back and forth. Citizens of these countries come into Lagos. And so there is a real risk that we may create an opportunity for this new mutant of Mpox to actually enter Lagos State. And so we are proactively preparing to ensure that we have the right ability to recognize it, the correct ability to diagnose it, the correct ability to speciate it, in other words, to distinguish the various mutants of Mpox, either Clade 2A, Clade 1A, or Clade 1B, and the correct environment to manage it and treat it. At the same time, we will be preparing our residents through a massive public health campaign so that they can recognize the risk associated with contracting Mpox, the risk associated with transmitting it, and the ability to recognize it if it should show up in your vicinity.
Let's talk about other stories. ECOWAS has presented a 5-year strategic plan to rejuvenate the region's peace fund through resource mobilization for capacity development of the regional bloc. The ECOWAS Peace Fund is an instrument for supporting the implementation of the conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security in ECOWAS. At a joint consultation meeting, the ECOWAS Peace Fund manager, Mr. Diodone Nikema, emphasized that the streamlined coordination of the donor-funded project in the peace and security sector will foster enabling environment for peace and security in West Africa.
The event of today is really what we call the joint strategic consultation on the ECOWAS Peace Fund. As you know, the ECOWAS head of states have set up this instrument since the year 2003. And along the line, it gets structured. It has have some impact support to the promotion of ECOWAS peace and security agenda in the region. And as a living body, it has to address some challenges because our region itself is facing different challenges. So the purpose of this meeting that is gathering us for 3 days is to get all the stakeholders so that together they can see what is the best structure we can have for the Peace Fund in order for it to be fit for purpose, in order for it to become very strong, enabled to mobilize more resources and also to manage resources for the well-being of the ECOWAS communities along all the 15 member countries. So we have here a representative from ECOWAS Commission, from ECOWAS specialized agencies, from development partners, and it is really a good time for us to reflect together and see how we can cross-fertilize our ideas to make it very strong and to respond to the needs of our different communities.
In businesses, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has established a 12-member anti-corruption and transparency unit to promote accountability within the agency. The unit, inaugurated by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, is tasked with ensuring zero tolerance for corruption in tax collection. The chairman of FIRS, Zach Adedeji, through his representative, emphasizes that their role is crucial in maintaining public trust in tax system. Let's head out to the international scene. Ukraine's troops' incursion into Russia's Kursk region is part of a victory plan. That's what they call it, that President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to present to U.S. President Joe Biden next month. Speaking at the forum, President Zelensky says the success of the plan would depend on President Biden and whether or not the U.S. will give Ukraine what is in the plan or not, and whether or not they will be free to use the plan. A number of Ukrainian troops made an incursion into Russia's Kursk region in early August, and Russia has so far seemingly been unable to repel them. And in sports, organizers of the Paris Olympics are hoping to capitalize on the fact that the Paralympics coincide with the back-to-school period. They've announced that over 2 million tickets have so far been sold as games prepare to open, and that's according to the International Paralympics Committee, IPC President, Mr. Andrew Parsons. There remains about 500,000 unsold tickets for the Paralympics, which get underway on today. It gets underway today with an opening ceremony in central Paris. The best-selling events are blind football, taekwondo, track cycling, shooting, triathlon, and others. Those are the stories we've been tracking for you in the last 24 hours. Will form part of our conversation for the program and the rest of the day. Cardi joins me now as we'll take a track up, or we're tracking what they've been saying on social media, especially on our social media of choice, which is X.
Absolutely, Jeffrey. I think the Olympics or Paralympics in this case got to you, so you're still thinking track.
Yeah, I'm still thinking in the track because I'm hopeful that we'll get a medal.
Oh yes, so
or medals, if you, as the case may be.
All the best to our para athletes. We're all behind you on this one. But let's see what you're saying back home. And Jeffrey, I think the natural place to start is from the fuel queues, the filling stations, or wherever you are right now trying to get petrol or thinking about how you get petrol. But another dimension to this is the fact that we've seen, filling stations selling not just for 800, 900, but above 1,000. I'm not talking black markets.
The proper stations.
The proper stations, right. So they're competing with black markets at this rate. So we understand that, the federal government says it will take action to close down filling stations that are charging 1,000 naira per litre for petrol, rather. And we'll see how this plays out. I know that some of them have said there will be surcharge for selling into jerry cans. I think about, I'm not sure, 5 million or 10 million for selling into jerry cans. Again, that's a very debatable issue. But this latest one,
I don't understand. I don't know the sense in that policy until they explain it to us, because I have generator, and how do I fuel my generator when I don't have light? So I don't understand that policy. So they need to explain.
You wonder how policies are made, but you understand that the black market is probably the target. But let's now take a look at what you're saying, particularly about this one. Johnson has the first one, and this user says, finally, with an exclamation mark. There you have it. The government stepping in to shut those stations charging 1,000 naira per litre is a must. We need fairness in pricing and protection for consumers.
Jeremiah Detunji says, pump the station with more than enough petrol and see the price come down. The law of demand and supply is ruthless.
It's like a no-brainer, right? Eze Rinze is next, saying they are not charging. So we need to get that correctly. They are actually selling for 1,000 naira. When you use the word charge, it connotes bargain or negotiation, whereas the price of fuel is non-negotiable. Oh. So the challenge that Eze Rinze has is with that use of the word charging. So he says, no, it's not charging, it is selling.
Okay. Carlo says, how will you sell fuel 1,000? How much did you buy it? I live in Lagos and I carry passengers when going to work on the island. I will never increase the fare because there's scarcity of fuel. No. As far as I did not buy it higher, I have no justification to increase the fare. That will be unfair. A lot of fare in your fare.
I don't know if pun was intended or not, but the point has been made. And the ripple effect, Jeffrey, is the concern again. So if people are buying petrol for above 1,000 naira, they'll naturally add it to whatever it is they're doing.
When they look at the landing costs.
Exactly. It either takes a toll on people's pockets, so they don't have disposable income for other things. By the way, some people even prioritize petrol over food, because they need petrol for work so they can get money to buy food.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure we're seeing this as a ticking time bomb, but that is what it is. This next user is Aquila of Kogi, saying FG should start with Kogi State. 1 litre is 1,000 300 naira. That is too ridiculous, this user says.
All right, Ben says, we have the citizens to take advantage of every situation. How can you inflate the price of fuel so high you could make excess gain and rip off the people? Where is your humanity or empathy, should say? So let's move to the next one. The federal government launching equivalent of NYSC program for NCE graduates. Kylie, have the first one.
Yeah, this has caused a lot of debate online. So let's take a look at what you're saying. The Minister of State for Youth made this statement saying, well, the government is planning to introduce something similar to the NYSC for NC graduates. I think at some point NC graduates could go for NYSC, but that has been stopped. So he says, well, we're trying to design something new. So the very first user, Barry_Presh, has this to say. This is just a proliferation of schemes. They shall join the NYSC, this user says. Majority of core members are posted to schools to teach. When the NCE graduates get their own program, will the NYSC start posting graduates to institutions relevant to their fields? You know, these are the issues.
Yeah. Poco A. Poco, God's favorite, that's your name. So if they further their education and later graduate from university, will they serve again? Good question.
And Northworthy King says they should scrap the two ideas and build schools and industries for graduates to work. Pay a stipend as social welfare for graduates for a year rather than posting someone to a place where nobody cares about him or her.
Okay, so those are the posts we can take on X. We also have your thoughts on the Super Eagles' new head coach, Bruno Labbadia, on all of that. So yeah. I prefer to call him Bruno, by the way.
So we'll keep that for the conversation.
Keep that for the conversation. We'll have the experts join us at some point. But we'll take this quick break. When we come back, we'll start our very conversation about the economy. Join us again.
You know, economic figures are usually quite tricky. You see one thing and then you try to reflect on it and wonder, is this my reality or just figures? That has been a classic debate. And today we get into it yet again, particularly because now is a crucial time for our nation, Nigeria. And, you know, all of the ideas are welcome just to ensure that we move forward considerably. We're joined on the program this morning, right here in our Lagos studio, by Mr. Roman Osayale, who's a business and economic intelligence analyst and a head consultant and CEO, Intelserve Incorporated. And joining us via Zoom is Gospel Bailey, a research economist. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you.
I'd just like to get your opening comments. GDP figures have been released. And as always, people look at the figures, they look at their pockets, they look around them, and they wonder, okay, how do we link this? Particularly because the WTO DG made a statement, I think 24 hours before the figures were released, talking about Nigeria's GDP steadily declining since 2014. And we got GDP figures for Q2 saying, well, we've done quite well, at least. There's a positive to it all. So I'd like us to start with the classic debate. When you look at the figures and look at the reality of people, particularly now, do they link up for you? Opening comments, then we'll dive deeper. I'll start with you.
Thank you for having me. GDP growth in Nigeria has never really, if you look at history, it has never really resulted in improvements of lives for the people. If you look at MBS figures from the 80s, you'll be surprised. Just like the GDP is going up, you also see poverty, increasing with it. And I've often argued that it's a result of our economic model, that we practice what is called an asset depletion economy, where you deplete your asset to fund your expenditure without appropriate reinjection to cover the liabilities of that depletion. So it's simple. It is just simple accounting and finance, where your total net worth equals your asset minus your liabilities. So each time you sell your crude or you mine your mineral resources, actually you're getting poorer because you're depleting your assets. The crude and the mineral resources that you mine and sell are part of your overall total wealth. So if you deplete them and you do not re-inject the appropriate amount to cover the liabilities of that depletion, you're basically getting poor. It's simple accounting and finance.
Particularly because oil output dropped, but the agri sector, we understand, improved, quite responsible for what we're seeing. But very important point you made, and we'll come to explore that further and look at the figures. But let me get your opening thoughts, Gospel, on this one. Please go ahead and preach.
Thank you very much, Kayode. I appreciate the time again. So it's really simple. From an economist standpoint, GDP and GDP growth only reflects economic activity. And you can agree with me that you can have motion in the wrong direction, or you can have motion without enough, to reflect a strategic direction. So GDP doesn't reflect economic productivity. They're two different things. So whilst the activity makes sense, and that's what we try to measure, that's what we try to discuss, that's what we try to reflect, it doesn't measure productivity. So the elements for productivity are non-GDP elements. However, GDP can be used, or policies can be used to steer GDP in the direction where it delivers productivity as well, such that public finance, public funding can go into infrastructure, into sectors, unlock the services sector as a low-hanging fruit, where it serves, it provides jobs for young people, where, the average common man can afford to eat, can afford to transport, can afford to find education and healthcare that elevates the quality of their lives. So when you see that productivity, it happens because policies have been engineered towards enabling more businesses and all of that. And that in turn empowers the GDP figures to go, in quote unquote, higher. So you can have high GDP or low GDP and then low production or low productivity either ways. All right. So it doesn't equate that we are moving, does not equate that we're moving in the right direction. If that makes it a bit easier to take in. So in as much as the GDP results are important, part of what we find today as an issue, not just in Nigeria, actually, it's a global issue. Low GDP growth is a global issue, but we've also seen that globally as well, the quality of life has dropped. And that's because nations are not focusing very clearly on the dynamics of productivity, and they're not empowering the dynamics of productivity. When that begins to happen, then we can begin to see.
Just quickly, I want us to do some basic economics this morning, because GDP, the definition of GDP, which is a gross domestic product, is a monetary measure, right, of the market value of all final goods that are, produced within a certain period of time. In this case, Q2. So if you say it doesn't measure productivity and it's the value of products or goods produced, does that not imply some sort of productivity? Again, we're doing economics 101 on the show this morning. So I'm trying to link that with what you said. That's why I'm cutting in.
Yeah, that's a productivity gap, as it were. All right. So for instance, you can have XYZ. So that's the total value, the total monetary value of total goods and services produced in the country. So business A produces shea butter. That's the total value of that shea butter produced in that quarter plus that of business B, X the total amount across all sector is what you find as total GDP. However, the individual who is producing shea butter may have some more difficulties producing that shea butter, and which is what we say, the fuel issue, the inflation or the interest rates and all of those things. So businesses are struggling to keep up with production. So the aggregate total of that production, if you notice, in terms of monetary value has dropped over time. All right. I mean, when was the last time Nigeria was at a 3.1% GDP? And which is what Dr. Okunji Iweala was talking about yesterday, that in 2014, we're hitting as high as 6.5%, 6%, 7% GDP. All right, which means that Mr. A was able to produce more because the economic conditions probably favored our production. Right, you can only produce more as a business when the economic conditions favor you, when the interest rates are slightly lower, when the inflation rate is lower, when it's easy to access raw materials. When you don't have so much of the fuel subsidy, fuel issues locally, when insecurity was not a major problem at the time. It was a problem, but not a major problem at the front line. So businesses could still produce. But now what you find is that businesses are now producing at a more expensive rate. So as a result, they are transferring the extra amount of what it costs them to produce to the average price unit of that commodity. So the average consumer is having to pay more. So the average business is having to pay more to produce. The average consumer is having to pay more to consume. So what you find is that people are spending more monies trying to feed, and they are unable to feed properly, or they are unable to feed at the quality and nutrients or quantity they require to live better or to have better lives. I'm trying to be as basic as possible. So you can have increased production or decreased production at higher cost of production, which is where the productivity dynamics or the productivity levelers really lie. And that's the challenge right now with the Nigerian, or in most cases, the global economic situation.
So let's bring it back to you,
thinking.
All right, let's bring it back to, I'm sure you have responses to some of the things he said, as well as given the explanations both of you have given so far. Should the government be counting this as a gain?
Okay, I'd like to say this. Since 1970, there's no administration, head of state, president, or regime in this country that has ever become successful economically in government outside the price of crude oil. Now, there are two things that determines your success as the president of this country: price and quantities of crude oil. If both are against you, you're toast. That's the truth. Now, if you look at the trajectory of the economy from 2014, and you see that right from 2014. Let's go to slide 4. You see that we started recording trade deficits from slide 4 from 2014, and because of that massive trade deficits, it led us to where we are today. We've recorded over $137.33 billion in trade deficits, right? Now, that's slide 4. That's Nigeria's trade surplus and deficit 1977 to 2023. Now, if you also look at the growth of this GDP, one thing stands out. The quarter 2 year-to-year GDP increase. Yeah, now that's you see that from 2014 till date, right? We've recorded a total deficit of $137.33 billion. Why? Because of the end of the oil booms of the 2000 that ended in 2013. Now, before 2013, right, you look at from 1998 to 2013, you see the massive trade surpluses. Why? It was because of the oil boom. There is no president that performs in office in this country outside the price and quantities of crude. Today, you will see that we have price on our side, but there is no quantity on our side. We're just doing an average of about 1.2 to 1.3 million barrels of crude per day. Now, what does that tell you? When you go back to slide 1, please. If you go to slide 1, right? Why is the quarter 2 GDP greater than quarter 2 GDP of why is quarter 2 GDP of 2024 greater than quarter 2 GDP of 2023? It's simple. When you look at the oil prices of quarter 2, 2023 and 2024, 2024 is more than. You look at, next slide, please. You look at the domestic production. We've been able to ramp up production more than what we did in 2023, right? And then you look at crude exports in millions of barrels per day, right? You see the same thing. Crude prices, you see that it's more than what we did in 2023, right? Now, let's go to slide 2, please. Slide 2. Slide 2 shows domestic production of crude oil, right? We've also done more than what we did in 2023. And then you go to the next slide. Crude oil exports, as in millions of barrels per day.
That's slide 3.
Yeah, slide 3. We've also done more than what we did in 2023. So it's very simple. Just like he was saying, the GDP is the sum total of production in the economy. But is our production of crude oil, is it based on actually the real sector? The real sectors are actually the drivers that hold economic growth and makes it sustainable. So if you are just mining crude and you're selling, you're not really adding any productivity to the economy.
But he also talked about the fact that report talks about that the service sector played a key role in the numbers that we're seeing today.
Okay, good. Let me ask you something. If Channels, for instance, right, increases your salary, let's just say from the amount they are paying you now to 10 million naira a month, will that not increase the household expenditure? Your banking will also benefit, right? So whatever you're saying is as a result of your bringing in more money into the economy, and the service sector is also going to benefit, because as the money comes into the economy, it basically spreads. So basically what is happening is that Nigeria is making more money. Nigeria has made more money in this quarter compared to the quarter of last year, and obviously that will trickle down in the economy.
Let's bring it to you, Mr. Gospel, on this one as a follow-up to that, because sometimes it feels like for developing economies like ours, it looks like we just want to be just part of the ecosystem, the global system, to be talking GDP. Should we be focusing more on GDP or maybe human capital development, which can trickle down to people's well-being, and we can see it reflect positively or negatively?
So first of all, generally, GDP is important it's important enough to have that type of attention that it's receiving now, especially globally, because of growth and how growth is now a major issue for major economies. And one of the things, or one of the advantage Nigeria has, is that, despite all the issues we're seeing globally, we've been positively growing, although very, very slow. Many nations in the West and all that have been struggling at 2% for a long time. And, it sounds like a rebound than a recovery, but then should we really be focusing on GDP? Well, I mean, GDP is one of the major economic indicators. Even businesses use GDP to make decisions.
Gospel, my apologies, Gospel, if you may. Sorry, I wanted to say Human Development Index, not Human Capital Development. So I just needed to contextualize for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, I will agree with you that I think there is too much focus on GDP in quote, but for developing economy, it has to be a shared focus, because you also need that growth side for investors to make decisions, right? And also you need that shift of focus across the Human Development Index. And when you talk about the Human Development Index, the major two things you're talking about is education and health. And then every other thing wraps into it nicely. All right. But it's fair to say that our policies and everything we've been driving as a people, as a government over a period of time, has not effectively delivered on those outcomes, which is why, again, GDP looks frustrated. The GDP does not create jobs. The GDP doesn't look inclusive enough, as it should. Regardless of what the rates are, unemployment is still going high, youth unemployment is still high, underemployment is the bigger monster in the room, right? So we need to actually agree with you, focus on our HDI, but then again, how do you deliver on your HDI outcomes if you're not, building infrastructure, if you're not creating the right reforms, if you're not nuancing your reforms enough to create the right deliveries across the board? And what I mean by that is that the type of reform a Lagos state will need is a completely different type of reform a Kano state will need, because those two different states have different economic realities and all of that. So, but then again, our reforms don't necessarily reflect. So, for instance, you had the Empower and a couple of other government social intervention programs, which are good, but to a large extent, they were not context fit in their delivery. How you deliver an Empower report in Osun State should even be different from how you deliver that same Empower report in Ekiti State. All right. So you may have two same states in the same region, but they are heavily nuanced in terms of economic realities and as such economic outcomes if you try to use one size fits all policies to fix them. So in our HDI thinking and design and outcomes, we need to really go deep into what the contextual issues are subnationally and locally, and then connect that deeply to GDP growth. And it's very simple. Once you're able to deliver HDI outcomes for people, they are much more productive. They can do more work, they can add more value to the economy, and that value over time improves the quality of your GDP. And I'm talking about the quality of a GDP, and that would mean the GDP rate or GDP growth, as well as the robustness of your economy. Even at 3%, 3.19%, our GDP is still not robust. Our economy is still not robust. For instance, if you look at the top 10 sectors that are driving growth, crop production is number one. All right, you do not, and that crop production, it's 90% of the agricultural sector. All right, so we're still struggling with an agricultural sector that is crop production led instead of value processing or value addition led. And that is what a value adding GDP should begin to look like, moving from a crop production based GDP to a value addition based GDP or sectoral representation. So I think we can deliver on both legs, and both legs are critical and important, to improve the quality of life and to achieve prosperity at a level for Nigerians.
By the way, we're meant to be doing double digits, right? It's been said that instead of running at the point we're meant to be running, we're still, crawling of sorts. In fact, we should be flying at this point with the challenges we're faced with. But I want to draw your attention, gentlemen, to something the IMF said yesterday. I was watching and listening to the IMF's resident representative in Nigeria, talking about Nigeria's GDP figures. So we're doing 3.19. But IMF said that, we can even do 5% this year if we're able to cut two issues. One, bottlenecks in governance and business regulations. If we're able to cut by 25%, then IMF projects that we're able to do 5% at least this year. That was a presentation yesterday from the IMF's resident representative here in Nigeria. So I don't know if it resonates with you, because if we talk about productivity, then obviously we need to do more for businesses, the SMEs that are lifeblood of our economy. If we're talking about investing in Nigeria, getting a lot more investment, then those bottlenecks with governance need to be looked at. So I don't know if that resonates with you. Do you think that is a low-hanging fruit that we can easily tweak and say, okay, let's reduce this 25% across whether federal or subnationals, and then we can get at least 5%?
Okay. I've done researches on the industrial revolutions. There are 4 key success factors, right? MSMEs are major drivers. They are the major drivers of the economy, right? Now, the success factors of industrialization, which I have seen repeat itself from one industrial revolution to the other. A key success factor there is government policies. Now, if the government policies are not aligned with the realities of things, right, there's a lot of bottlenecks that will be created. Now, in Nigeria, we have a lot of inconsistent policies, and that's a major setback for investments. a major setback for foreign direct investments. So there was a story I read one time where I think a major oil company that had to go to Angola. And when I read what the CEO of the company said, it boiled down to policies, that they were not sure that they could do business in Nigeria because they were not sure of the next policies that the governments were going to give. You know, you don't want to put money into an investment and then the next day you find out that the policies have changed. They have to be very, very consistent. You're right, we can do that 5%, but government needs to sit up in bringing in the right policies to drive growth. That's just it.
Let's take it to gospel. This particular question, let me piggyback on what Kayode said, because I know Okonjo-Iweala at WTO DG, she said, we need to be consistent we need to be very consistent with our policies. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said, we need to be consistent with our policy. And she was explaining that, look, we need to look at the way we do our politics by essence, so that when we come together and put together a policy, an administration, another administration will not come and just change the policy and make us lose the billions we lose in terms of investment. So for you, Gospel, as an economist, if you were to advise the policymakers, who are the politicians at the end of the day, what will it be that they can do to improve investor confidence? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about productivity. Because I'm even wondering how we grew with the environment we're living in terms of high cost of doing business, in terms of high interest rates, some companies closing shops, and we're still pointing 3.19. It's impressive if we're recording the negative side and still having a high growth in GDP. I just needed your take on it.
I mean, in terms of being that impressive, that tells you the level of resilience of the Nigerian economy, in as much as so many things have failed, you know, and that's also to tell you that many things are still working. However, if we had that consistent policy beat, like Dr. Okonjo-Iweala had mentioned, a lot of things would be way better than it is right now. But if you look at it globally and even in Nigeria, it's always a tug of war between politics and policy, you know, and one will always rub up on the other. And unfortunately, politics always rubs up on politics. Even in the UK, you see how the Tories and the Labour are, you know, having, you know, at loggerheads on policies, you know, and then how politics has come to play on that outcome as well. So I think it's everywhere in the world. That inconsistency of policies is everywhere in the world. But for some nations, it's really it's a more serious thing to look at. And for Nigeria, it's quite worrisome, because even at the policy side, you can even question the quality of thinking, the quality of design that goes into this policy, the quality of its delivery. And in many cases, we get the policies right, but in the delivery phase of those policies, it's literally very poor. And then on the layer of that, there are issues with inconsistency, and it's even incoherent, meaning one policy is not enabling the delivery of the other one, or it's disenabling the delivery of the other one. So I agree, we need to constantly look at those policies in terms of, you know, and all of that. But then the political class have to be, as much as possible, you know, embrace the need for policy consistency, because you can't also take out the fact that politics is a major bit of on this whole mix. And one important thing that we need to understand about the politics and dynamics of things is that politics would deliver policies on the grounds of interest to start with. So if the people at the politics table do not align on interest, it will be a lot difficult to further a particular policy consistently over a period of time. And that's how the world is beginning to evolve, and unfortunately Nigeria as well. So how do you get politics to revolve around the place of interest that favors the people, so that policies can be furthered or delivered consistently over time in that space? That is one of the biggest challenge of the 21st century, and even a bigger challenge for developing economies like Nigeria. Also important for us to take into consideration that we have low-hanging fruits, all right? And like IMF had mentioned, that Nigeria needs to probably reach the 5%. We can do way more than the 5%. But my argument has always been, since I started practicing as an economist, I don't think it's much about the GDP growth than it is about the quality of life of the average man. We can still hit 7%, and the exchange rate is really at a very, very, very poor state. We can still hit 7%, and the cost of doing business is very high. So we need to deal with the productivity levelers, or the productivity drivers, so to say, the access to market issue, the access to finance issue. The average Nigerian startup, you know, should be able to produce chocolates, and those chocolates should be able to thrive globally. I should be able to buy those chocolates in the UK. Somebody else should be able to buy those chocolates in New York, a made in Nigeria chocolate in New York. All right. Until we're able to scale our economy or SMEs at that level, Nigeria may not be able to get past its productivity issues or its growth vis-a-vis productivity issues that we have today. Also to think about the fact that,
pardon me, the point you made is quite important. I remember we had a conversation recently with a chocolate producer who says he still has to buy cocoa in dollars here in Nigeria. So imagine he's seeing the cocoa being harvested not far from him, and he's trying to purchase it, but he has to buy it in dollars. And we've clamored, hopefully the government listens, and to try to introduce the same policy they're trying to implement in the crude oil sector, selling crude in Naira, for maybe producers or people who want to buy cocoa and some of these other raw materials. So a very vital point you made. And it just takes me to the next question. And I want both of you to speak to it. Mr. Osayali, you opened up this particular conversation earlier on where you talked about how the price of crude oil and the production of crude oil is tied to whatever figure we're seeing, particularly in the economy. And said that if the figures don't look good, then the administration is toast in some sense. So I don't know if you're clamoring for, I don't want to use diversification because we've used that term for decades now.
It's always been abused.
And it's been abused. But perhaps that's what you're clamoring for. Do you see low-hanging fruits that we can leverage? And I saw agricultural sector doing some numbers in this figure. Well, you've explained the services sector and where we're seeing that. So what will be your prescription? And I'm looking for prescriptions that we can begin to latch onto ASAP.
Okay. I want us to go to slide 7. Just go to slide 7. You see, I always tell people, once you read your budget, right, your yearly budget, you'll know where the country is headed. Now, I actually clipped this from the MBS, slide 7. It shows poverty profile 2010, right? That's the heading of the report, slide 7. Now, if you look at the next slide after that, right? From slide 7, let's go to slide 8. You find out that from 1980, as the population increased, right, poverty also increased. Now, you just need to go look at your budget. Let's go to slide 8, please. Slide 8. Now, you find out that as poverty increased, as population increased, poverty increased. The GDP was increasing. But one thing is for sure, when you look at the budget, look at your education expenditure, look at your health expenditure, look at your expenditure for infrastructure. Those are the 3 things that create wealth in an economy.
Say that again. Education,
health, and infrastructure.
And the first one, the HDI.
Good. At the HDIs, you understand? Go to slide 9. You find out that let's even take budget 2024 for instance, right? We had a $36 billion budget, but when you look at the funds that were allocated to these 3 things, we're only 13% of the budget. So this is the reason why you find out that no matter what you do, we can't get out of this quagmire we found ourselves, because the investment part of the budget is investment that actually create wealth and move people out of the economy. But basically what we're doing is we're just selling the crude oil and we're spending on frivolities.
What are those frivolities you've noticed, just so we break it down properly?
Okay, good. Now look at the government expenditure, for instance. Now, you cannot run a 70-75% recurrent expenditure and only a 20-25% capital expenditure and expect that an economy will grow. It's not possible.
Okay.
It's not possible.
Let's take it to Mr. Gospel. That means if you look at even the budget of the ministries, you see that personnel cost alone takes on
so
a lot.
You look at travels, you look at allowances. You know, I've always said this, right? The budget is designed to put money in the pockets of people, and it is not designed for growth and investment.
Okay, I think I've seen that level of what you mentioned in some of the budgets we looked at. Mr. Gospel, let's begin to wrap this up. So, do you think that also value addition, some level of getting to where the NNPCL is saying we want to be net exporter of petroleum products is going to lead us to a better economy? Because it looks like Africa is a hub for raw materials, not for finished products, and that has held us back.
One of the reasons why Africa is a hub for raw materials and not finished products is because of fiscal and people in discipline to a very large extent, or governance in discipline, safe to say. But to a large extent, people are the ones governing. Now, when I mean people, I'm not talking about those in government alone, pressure groups, civil society, individual citizens, and all that. But safe to say that the Nigerian economy is already diversified. Diversification is no longer the problem because you have 94% of the economy built on non-oil. You have 58% of the economy services driven. Very few countries will you find that at par level of agriculture and industry. Then you have now have that 58% pillar for services. But what has happened is that there are no productivity drivers powering those sectors. The UK is services driven, Dubai is trying to be, and all of that. So, but Nigeria has those shared representation already. So, diversification is not a problem. The problem has been we've not properly unlocked the productivity drivers across those diversified streams that we have at the moment. So one of the major things we can then begin to look at is how do we embrace value additions in the context of our productivity drivers across the non-oil sector. Now, you have a lot of SMEs who are ready to export, but they are unable to export. You have a lot of people who are in the services sector, who can probably freelance or graphic design and all that, but they probably even do remote work for companies abroad. But we don't even have the data. Nigeria doesn't have a national services policy. We don't have a national services policy that is helping to unlock the value of the services sector. If you look at the gig sector, MCs, event managers and all that, there is nothing happening at that sector to create more ecosystem value. There's a lady called Nigeria Branch. She did a trade fair in the UK. That should be something that should be powered in collaboration with the Nigerian government to support more Nigerian businesses get their made in Nigeria products out there. But there was a lot of struggle, because you can't do it alone as an individual. You can't upscale that kind of thing as an individual. So in terms of there are issues around how we are positioning, there are issues around where we are investing in. And like my colleague said on the call, the budget is an instrument that shows where the government's language and commitment is. It's a different conversation when you're talking about diversification. Economy is already diversified, but the attention, the commitment, and the resource to power the value of that diversification that already exists is tilted wrongly. I don't know if you get what I mean. So, and that's the issue that we're probably having as one of the pool of challenges. So I think we need to begin to organize ourselves in such a way that we need to prioritize. And it's actually difficult to prioritize when you have a lot of vested interest on the table. So the question is, need to align those interests in the areas where the interest of the populace, the interest of the OPS, the business community lies, and begin to drive policies in those areas. And one of the critical elements of the Nigerian economy that can begin to drive those kind of things are pressure groups, civil society groups, organized private sector groups. But the problem as well is that they don't advocate intelligently. They don't lobby intelligently, and all of those things. So you need to be able to get government to a point where they can understand that their interest must align with the diversified streams of the economy to unlock value. And when you unlock value, it's going to be prosperity for all to a large extent. However, as well, the principle of extractive institutions and how extractive institutions work is to disempower the majority to empower the minority, which is a conversation for another day. So the prospect of Nigeria working is there.
Right.
All right. We don't need to do anything more than than we need to do. We just need to align the interests on policies in areas and spaces where it delivers value for the already diversified economy.
So let the politics deliver good policies. After all, that is meant to be the essence of politics, not fighting and all of that. But gentlemen, we have to thank you so much for your interventions on this one. Clearly, there's a lot of potential, as we've said, and all of these ideas, we hope we can bring them together and ensure that we use them for the good of our nation. Gospel Obele, a research economist, thank you for your time and for preaching on the show this morning, as well as Mr. Roman Asayale, business and economic intelligence analyst, head consultant, CEO, Intel Serve Incorporated. Thank you for your interventions.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, Nigeria has a new head coach for the Super Eagles. What is the job ahead? What is his pedigree? These are some of the issues we'll look at, particularly what you've also been saying about Labbadia. Stay with us.
The wait for a new head coach for the Super Eagles has finally ended after the Nigeria Football Federation confirmed German Bruno Labbadia as new manager of the country's senior men's national team. This comes after former Nigeria international Finidi George left the role following Super Eagles' unimpressive performances against South Africa and Benin Republic in the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers in June. Labbadia has previously managed a host of German Bundesliga sides like Hertha Berlin, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg, Hamburg, and Bayer Leverkusen. His last 3 roles for Wolfsburg, Hertha Berlin, and Stuttgart aren't rosy, as he was sacked by all 3 clubs for poor run of results. However, he boasts of an unenviable managerial scorecard of 214 wins, 103 draws, and 170 losses, which amounts to 43.94% win ratio. The 58-year-old becomes the 6th German to coach the Super Eagles after Karl-Heinz Morawski, Gottlieb Goller, Manfred Hohne, Betty Vogt, and Gernot Roy. Labbadia will begin his stint with the 3-time African champions in next year's Africa Cup of Nations qualifying matches against Benin Republic on September 7 in Uyo and Rwanda on September 10th in Kigali.
Mr. Seun Jidagba, sports journalist, joins us. So, speak on this issue about the new coach of the Super Eagles, Bruno Labbadia. I'm sure Nigerians we're going to pronounce that name differently as much as we can. But Bruno is what we agree on. I like to call him Bruno, by the way. Welcome, Mr. Seun.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think my first question will be to you. Is this the best we can get?
When the desirable is not available, the available becomes the desirable. Definitely, this is not the best we can get. And I say it with a sense of responsibility. We always have a way of doing our things that leaves question mark in whatever decisions we make. Exactly 73 days when Finidi George dropped that letter of resignation, we just woke up to appoint Bruno Labbadia. He came out of the blues because he was not part of those that the technical committee were talking to. And just 10 days to the game against Benin Republic, a Benin Republic that has our numbers, a Benin Republic that is coached by Gennaro, who is also a German. Now, there were names that were bandied, names like Jane Anderson of Sweden, Averena, Aitor Karanka, Gustavo Poirier, and you begin to ask yourself that how did this name suddenly pop up? But you also have to look at the NFF, who will tell you there is paucity of funds, and so they had to go for the cheapest option. If you look at the win ratio of Bruno Labbadia, it doesn't exude any confidence. He doesn't have the national team experience. To put it into proper context, he's the 37th manager that the Nigerian Football Federation will be employing, but more importantly, the 6th German that will be having in our ranks, from Karl-Heinz Morawski to Gottlieb Goller, to Betty Vogt, to Manfred Hohne, to Gennaro, and then Bruno Labbadia. And so the question is, just 10 days to the game against Benin Republic. We went to play Benin Republic in a World Cup qualifier, not in Benin Republic, in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast.
In a neutral place.
In a neutral place. And I listened to Gennaro this morning saying, give him time. He's a good coach, but he will not get one over me. Because I understand the Gospel Akpabio Stadium in Uyo. The stats are there. 487 games, 214 wins, 103 drawn, 170, 43.94%. We all went to school. We all knew that 40% is pass. And so this is just some 3.94% above pass. So we just agree that we are getting a coach of pass. So in university, is that how you finish with the first class, a second class upper, a second class lower, a pass,
a third class,
and a pass. So we got a pass coach.
It looks like you're clearly very unhappy about this, apparently.
I always say to people, there's too much anyhowness, if there's any English like that, in the Nigerian Football Federation and how we do things. And I said, from Amaju Melvin Pinnick to Guzo, the difference is the same.
I've never heard that before. The difference is the same. But very interesting point you're making. And I want us to bring this together and look at all of the different arguments here and there. And you've mentioned some of them. One is funds. In fact, some have proposed that now is not a time for Nigeria to even be spending money on Olympics. We saw how much they said they spent, over 10 billion naira. We saw, or at least for both of them, but for the Olympics, they got 9 billion or thereabouts. And we saw the result, or lack of it, as the case may be. So funds is a big deal. So some people are saying, instead of spending money on sports, let us take that, for example, the 9-10 billion. We can let Paralympics go because they always get us medals. But take it and invest it in something. And so, you know what? Since we know we're not getting returns from this thing, let us focus on maybe infrastructure. So when you talk about funds, the thinking is if we spend, let's say, I don't know how much Harvey Reynard would want to collect, but if we spend $50,000, people will say, what? How would we be spending that much on sports? So isn't it also a no-brainer to go for the cheapest option? And naturally, and this is by no means an insult to his quality or what have you, but isn't that what you get if you don't have as much money? You don't get first class. You get third class or a pass. Isn't that a no-brainer?
Now, I recall vividly that we lost the AFCON final under Jose Victor dos Santos Pesero on the 11th of February, which was a Sunday. And on the 29th...
You'll never forget that day, have you?
Yeah. And so, when we even got Pesero, the question is, was Pesero the best option for us? It was a no.
But he tried to get us to the finals. What was the deal with Pesero?
Can I put a question to you?
No, I asked the question.
No. Can I tell you
Go ahead.
a good fact? That's the worst performance of Nigeria at any tournament. The stats are misleading. And I tell you why. Nigeria lost about 13 people who passed on as a result of watching the Super Eagles of Nigeria. And what led to that? The hypertensive football that the Super Eagles of Nigeria played. The game against South Africa in the semi-final, we lost about 6 people alone. Because that performance wasn't anything that was great. Now, when you...
I know it's important to put context to issues, and it's really sad that we lost people.
Yeah.
But we know how football can be. If you're an Arsenal fan, if you're a Chelsea fan, you know what
No, let's stay with Arsenal.
Let's stay with Arsenal.
Yeah,
okay,
let's stay with Arsenal.
Come to
With
Chelsea.
all respect.
Okay. You know how much of a roller coaster football can be.
The place you are going to, don't talk about Arsenal.
Okay. Actually, not anymore, right?
You should leave it at Chelsea. Because that's the pride of London.
Oh, there you go. So you know how football can be.
I know.
Normally, it's a very emotional sport.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad we lost people, but I mean, football is football.
Football is football. Now, when Pesero left on the 29th of February, he left because initially when he came, he was earning $70,000
A month.
The NFF reviewed his contract and dropped him to $50,000. And after the final, he felt, I've taken you people to the final, I can still go one step further. And he was requesting for $120,000. And that was the reason they could not engage him. Now look at the Nigerian Football Federation and how classless we do things. Somebody had left the position on the 29th of February. They did not appoint Finidi George until the 29th of April. And you now tell us that the reason you appointed Finidi was because he has spent about 20 months with Jose Pesero. If you knew that he has spent 20 months with Jose Pesero, they say if it's not broken, you don't fix it. You allow him to continue. You'll have made that announcement early March. More importantly, I asked a question. I love Finidi George as a footballer, but I didn't like him to take up that job. And it was like he was being set up to fail. If we knew that the football played under Jose Pesero wasn't good, and the person who assisted him is the next person you are now saying should come and take up the job, Does he not say something about the technical committee that is not serious?
So clearly you have a problem with the technical committee and the administration.
There's nothing technical in the technical committee.
Okay.
And the difference is the same.
For you, the difference is the same. So now,
oh gosh,
Labbadia Bruno,
Yes.
Bruno Labbadia,
Yes.
this is what we have.
Yes.
We can't run away.
Yes.
I don't know how much is going to be paid. Maybe give us that amount.
They've not told us.
They will tell us later. We'll eventually find
Yes.
out at the end of the day. But this is what we have. This is what we'll prosecute our combat on the field with. So we can't run away from this. So let's take it up from here,
Yes.
going forward. What needs to be done?
The first thing that needs to be done, he needs to correct the wrongs that has happened. We are in the World Cup qualifier. We missed out on Qatar 2022. The first time it will be going to that region. It's still hot. 2026 will be hosted by 3 countries, USA, Canada, and Mexico.
The Americas.
The Americas. It looks like we are not going to be at that World Cup. We are 4th in that group, and we just have 3 points. Now, looking at the group of the World Cup, we have countries that love cricket, because I'm a cricket person, than even football. You have countries like Rwanda, cricket playing country, South Africa, Lesotho ahead of us. And then we are just above the likes of Zimbabwe, and Benin Republic are also ahead of us. Now, going forward, the first game of this man is on the 7th of September. The Super Eagles of Nigeria must show some high level of commitment, because in the 2 games against South Africa and Benin Republic, the Super Eagles of Nigeria were not serious. I will not be telling them, you will not be telling them to be serious, because I've always said that going to the World Cup, the biggest gain is for the players, not for you and I. Why am I saying this? There is a certain amount of money FIFA pays every association, and they also pay the club. Take for instance, they give you about $12 million for preparation for the World Cup. Now, even in the group stage, you earn about $9 million. These players, when they do well, it's either they get improved contracts in their clubs, or they go to another club. Bruno Labbadia has to first get a result at Uyo. We've seen the list. He was not the one who drew up the list. The list was drawn up by members of Nigeria Football Federation.
But will he be the ones want to take charge of that game?
He's taking charge of the game.
I think it's meant to be
Augustine Gabon.
Yes.
No, he's taking charge of that game, and they said it's with immediate effect. So less than 10 days to the game against Benin Republic, with General who understands Uyo, who has played there when he was appointed sometimes in 2016, will now be coming up against a manager who did not draw up the team, but needs to galvanize them to get the result. And Benin Republic will say to themselves, when they even came to Abidjan, we beat them. We can go to Nigeria and also beat them on their home ground. The next game will be against Rwanda. In that group for AFCON 2025 qualifiers, you know the thing about this is that all the games will be played this year, because AFCON is in 2025. And the group we are, there is nothing that would not make us not qualify from that group so easily, because these are countries we should be beating: Rwanda, Libya, Benin Republic. Those good old days under late Rashidi Yekini, Sunday Ogochukwu Olise, Chinenwanu, Michael Menalo, Peter Rufai, Benny Roha. When you don't watch games, you just ask, what was the scoreline? That's what you'll be asking. But these days, we are playing against Benin Republic and our heart is quaking. We are playing against Rwanda and our heart is beating. I travel to Rwanda almost all the time. Rwanda is not up to Lagos. And these are the teams that are beating us. See, one of the worst results Nigeria has ever had playing against teams have been prosecuted by foreign players.
I asked for solution.
Yes, the solution is it needs to beat Rwanda.
There you go.
And it needs to beat Benin Republic.
Quite a tough job ahead of him, definitely. And you have to give kudos to some of these teams also. They've improved their gameplay. It's 11 versus 11, and there are no underdogs. And I think you sports people say that there are no underdogs.
Let me tell you something. One word I always hate to hear, if you see a sports journalist say there are no more minnows in football, that person should resign immediately. There are still minnows. It's when the giants are sleeping that the minnows catch up with them. Today, if Brazil plays against South Sudan, they will beat them like they stole. If England plays against Estonia, they will beat them silly. If Argentina played against Guatemala, they will beat them silly.
Well, all those countries, they can come up with good game plans.
That's why they call it
have
upset.
a good mental.
That's why they call it upset. It doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's because we as giants, we are sleeping. And that's why we are afraid of Benin Republic.
Okay, I like your point, really. But, just to reiterate that, what I meant to say earlier was, instead of spending like $180,000, because I heard that's what Hervé Renard was asking
close
for.
To 200.
Close to $200,000. So I'm sure that they thought, why spend that much?
Yes.
You can spend less. Well, Jeffrey was asking about solutions. And one of the challenges I think we've had, again, sometimes we seem to know what we want. When we get it, we're like, no, this is not what we want. So we've said, let us get Nigerian coaches, right? We got one. I said, no, we don't want this because players will not respect him. And we saw what played out. The video by Osimhen and all of those things that happened. It was quite messy, I must say. So in terms of respecting, do you think players will now respect this coach? Whether or not they've not been respecting the others is another thing entirely. In terms of respect and having a handle on the team, do you think we at least will get that with Bruno Labbadia?
That's what the players do. When they see a white skin, they just almost immediately comport themselves. Because the coaches we have been getting in the last 3 periods, factor in Finidi George, I want to take him away from General, who nobody ever knew. The highest he ever did was in France, to Jose Pesero, who had worked with Jose Mourinho, and maybe the Jose was why the NFF...
That's his referee in the city.
Yes, in
once
the
they see that,
and Bruno Labbadia.
Yeah.
Bruno Labbadia is more of a Shondash in Everton that will stab you of relegation. That's what he knows how to do best. Not like he's that coach. Even when he was playing for the German national team, he only had 2 caps.
The way you're sounding, I feel like we should sack Labbadia.
No, it's not like we should sack. We have gotten Labbadia. There's nothing we can do. So what I'm just saying in essence is that the players will not start under Finidi George. The players weren't responsive. The game against South Africa, we knew we had a big game against
Okay, let's break it down. My apologies. So apparently, if you have your way, Labbadia should just stay where he is and not even report to work.
I think there are other issues he's also raising.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of things he's pointed out in terms of his performance, his pedigree, and all of the numbers he's talked about. So let's talk about the players. You've mentioned them. I think we should stay with them.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they're the ones on the field.
Yes.
Following the instruction of the technical team or the coach, whoever is giving them direction. Psychologically, how should these boys, if you were to speak to them, would you be telling them? We have barely 10 days. All this grammar we're speaking.
Yes.
In 10 days, we'll be having 90 minutes to reverse the mess we left off as far as the other qualifiers are concerned. You've mentioned teams like, naturally, we should say, okay, you're playing Rwanda. Okay, we'll not watch the match because we have the numbers. But now it doesn't work like that. 90 minutes of anxiety, that's what they put us through. So what will you be telling these players as far as that first match is concerned? Because that's what got Finidi George, that made Finidi George to resign. It looked like it was set up. First match, abysmal. Second match, abysmal. And then he had to leave.
Coincidentally, I'm a sport analyst psychologist. Now, what I'll be telling the players is, I don't want to hear before the game, all those newspaper headlines, we'll spill blood, we'll die on the field. Don't give me that line. You are a big team, and you people are big players. Show them why you are Wilfred Ndidi. Show them why you are Victor Osimhen. Even I have issues with that. I would have thought that Victor Osimhen should have been invited at all for this game. The last time Victor Osimhen played, Cardi, was on May 26th.
Like any match at any football
competitive
match
game. Yeah. So it's match rusty. Show them why you are Ademola Lookman. Show them why you are William Trustekon. Show them why you are Stanley Nwabali. Show them why you are Olaino. Show them that you are senior players and you are heads above them. You are class. Just like we say, Channels is class above every other person. And that's why whatever you do, you are always there. Elephants don't pray to be big. Naturally, they are big. We are a big team. We need to show these teams that we are big. And you beat them in such a way that you send message to other teams.
Mentality. And you see that when Brazil plays.
Yes.
You see the courage. You see the way the players carry themselves and play. I mean, I'm looking at the team that has been announced,
Yes.
and you've mentioned quite a number of them. And as you were mentioning names, I was looking at it and imagining them play and seeing the kind of quality these guys bring to the field. And I'm really resonating with you. I've laughed a lot during this interview because some of your submissions are quite interesting. So you look at this thing: Sterling Wabali, goalkeeper. I mean, shot stopper any day. You see Shemi Ajayi, defender Calvin Bassey. I mean, that guy is big. You see Olaino, you mentioned Olaino, Bright Osai, Samuel, Alex Iwobi, midfielders, Franco
Lukman,
Yeka.
the record breaker.
Exactly. And I'm going even to the forwards. We have a long list of forwards. Samuel Chukwueze, aside Ademola Lukman, Victor Osimhen. By the way, I don't know if it's any fault of his that he hasn't played since May. Maybe we'll touch on that. You see others, Taiwo Awoniyi, Victor Boniface. Would you think we should judge him from the very first match if we don't get that result?
Would you even think, just to answer your question, do you even think it's fair to judge anyone from the very first match? Because the pressure is extreme. There's a lot of pressure, let's be sincere, on the coach.
You know, the funny part is that it's a September of Germans. Bruno Labbadia, Super Eagles coach. General, Cheetahs coach of Benin Republic. Thorsten Sprinsler, coach of Rwanda, also from Germany.
Okay.
We need to start judging from the very first game, despite having a short time. Revenge is on our mind. Revenge is on our mind. We are still talking about the World Cup group that we have found ourselves, how only one team will qualify. And if you look across the other groups, you find out that Africa has 10 slots because it's been increased now. Every top team is topping their group. Super Eagles are the ones who have found themselves in 4th position. And you now look at the teams we played. Played against Lesotho. Played against Zimbabwe. We could not get a result. Played against South Africa. We could not get a result. Played against Benin. We could not get a result. The question is, in that kind of group, we should be held and above every other person. So the players must step up their game and show us why they are Super Eagles of Nigeria. And why am I saying this? That a draw is like a psychological setback for us. Because we are going away to Rwanda, and Rwanda will be saying to themselves, we can beat these people in the city of 1,000 hills and mountains.
Quite a valid point. I don't know if that's why you now you have a love for cricket. Maybe we'll talk about that another day. Maybe you've seen football and you said, well, the heartbreak with football is a lot. Let me have a side chick in place of cricket. Is that why?
Not that. It's just that growing up as a secondary school student, I love cricket because of the attire they put on, the white before it was changed, and they say it's a gentleman's game. I love football also, but the Super Eagles
are breaking your heart.
I know I don't.
And you love cricket so much. I know you talked about Rwanda. That's why you're in Uganda.
Yes,
so there's a die all over you, all over the place.
Yes.
So whether Rwanda, Uganda, okay, but without Nigeria, but it's fine. But we hope for the very best for the Super Eagles. Well, look, some of us wanted to be footballers. For real, I wanted to be a footballer. My inspiration was people like Rashidi Yekini. Funny enough, in the early 90s, I wanted to be a footballer. But well, I'm happy where I am. But
we'll have been giving you fire
because if they play,
I
guess if they play the kind of football these guys are playing, I wouldn't have been inspired to aspire to be one. So they are also denying young people the opportunity to aspire. So they need to perform well. So I must thank you, Sheun Ajidagba, sports journalist and cricket lover, also a critic of the Super Eagles. Passionate lover of the Super Eagles.
I totally enjoyed this conversation.
I want them to do well, because when they do well,
we'll come back and say, yes, we were wrong. We'd like to come back and say we were wrong.
Absolutely. Egg on my face.
Thank you for coming on the program. We'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll talk about your heart health. Join us again.
Well, let's get to the heart of the matter. Literally, and this concerns your health, and whether you say cardiovascular health or what have you, it's a very important one. We've seen very concerning incidents of youth heart attack. I mean, heart attack used to be something you maybe attribute or associate with the, older generation, but what we've seen of late is quite concerning. So this morning we're talking about your heart, our hearts, and we have joining us a consultant physician and cardiologist at LUF, Dr. Akinsoya Olusegun Joseph, joins us virtually as we talk awareness around cardiac health. Dr. Olusegun Joseph, you're welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is a very important conversation, and I know you are inundated with cases, reports on a daily basis about, cardiac issues. I want you to give us a view, a sense of where we're at least from where you sit. You sit at a very privileged point. I know there's a lot of pressure and hard work involved, but talk to us about the trends. Is this really an issue to concern ourselves with, or it's just the normal figures you've seen across decades?
Well, thank you very much once again. Heart attack, sudden death, and a lot of cardiac abnormalities are on the rise, and that globally, really. Not only that, when you talk of cardiac abnormalities, cardiac pathologies, they are actually much more common in this part of the world, the sub-Saharan Africa. All right, so and the reason for that is because of a lot of factors that are not yet or have not been greatly managed, have not been greatly addressed. Okay, so it's very, very important that we become more aware of cardiac health, cardiac abnormalities, so that we can be able to stem the tide. It is something that is increasing by the moment. And it's not only in this part of the world, everywhere, the Western world, and it cuts across, knows no social strata, knows no economic values and stratas. It cuts across. We need to do something about it.
I'm looking at figures between 60s and 80s. A study that showed that coronary heart disease, a condition that limits flow to heart's major blood vessels, was a rarity in Nigeria, about 1 in 20,000. And those are the figures I'd like us to speak to. Today, that is not the case. It is rising at an alarming rate. So is it as a result of lifestyle? We know that there's a lot more stress these days. A lot of people have to combat different things, so like what we used to have then. So is it as a result of lifestyle? Is it as a result of diet? And I want you to put them in buckets. Is it as a result of diet or something else that we've not really paid attention to?
Okay, thank you very much. So you're very correct. The first time that coronary artery disease and heart attack, was looked into frantically in Africa, not many people were found. In fact, there was a professor that said, if you see 2 or 3 heart attack patients in Africa, I'm going to give you this. He put a price tag on it. And for more than 2-3 years, nothing was found. All right? Like you rightly said, in the 80s, 1 in 20,000. Okay, but now we have it alarmingly high. It's increased by the moment, increasing by the day. And the reasons are very much, intertwined. Number one, lifestyle is very important. But before lifestyle, genetic predisposition is there. The way I say is genetics load the gun, but lifestyle fires it. So genetic predisposition can be there, and then you now add lifestyle to it. All right. The diet, we're becoming more westernized in our diet, fast food, processed meals, fatty meals, increased salt diet, and the rest. All right. Even for those who do not have familial predisposition, okay, the lifestyle can make the gun, load it, and fire it. All right. So what are the risk factors? The modifiable risk factors I will talk about. Number one, our diet. Okay, increased salt diet, increased cholesterol diet. Food rich in fats, increased sedentary lifestyle. Many people are becoming more sedentary. Yes, we put in more work, but the fact is that the average person is much more sedentary now than a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades ago. Very, very important. Many people are not exercising anymore. in those days, you could remember that, people trek a lot. We trek to school, but now the tricycles are there, the bike riders are there, and people are just ready to take things. Okay, for the executive people, they move from AC car to the front of the elevator, and then they get up there, and after that, they move straight into their office, have very prolonged meetings without standing up, without moving. So sedentary lifestyle have increased. Obesity is on the increase, of course, because of these three factors: increased salt diet, increased cholesterol intake, and fatty meals intake, increased processed meal, and sedentary lifestyle. Okay, these are things that have been on the rise and have increased the chances of obesity. So obesity is on the rise. Even teenage obesity, adolescent obesity, childhood obesity is on the rise. All right, these are very important things we must look at. And of course, smoking is in the mix as well.
All right, Doctor. So
you can go ahead.
You've mentioned a few things, so let's dig down, dig deep rather into some of the things you've mentioned. Literally, you're saying there's a curse that comes with comfort if we don't manage it properly. So let's talk about predispositions as well as food. Maybe what will help our audience the most today on this program, as far as this subject matter is concerned, is the kind of food they eat that at least can help them either reduce it or that has almost predisposed them to cardiovascular issues. So we have all kinds of food. So maybe you mention specifically, because I know you mentioned them in certain classes, maybe specifically the ones you can mention that are not really good, whether it's by age bracket or by geographical location, that are not good for our heart, and the ones that are good for us. Let's start from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now, I mentioned increased salt diet. If you look at our world and our society, we're getting more salt loving. I mean, fast food areas springing up and down. These are not bad on their own. I mean, affluence, civilization, and increased, opulence, not bad on their own. But then, when it's not well managed, just as you have said. So increase salt diet. And when we say salt diet, we mean everything salty, including salty condiments. All right. The noodles of our children are super saturated with salt. One sauce of the noodle can cook about 4 to 5 packs of those noodles. But then you see people doing one for one. That is alarming. Okay, that will obviously predispose to cardiovascular abnormalities, to hypertension, to heart disease, to heart attack, to a lot of things, name it, heart failure and the rest. Increased processed meals, okay, because number one, they have a lot of chemicals to try and preserve them, and then very high cholesterol content. Okay, these are things that can impact negatively on the heart. I mean, it comes to a time where the heart vessels becomes blocked, and then blood flow is not so abundant as it should be because of the blockage. And then ischemic disease can come on board. All right. There are people that also live perpetually on fried things, fried this, fried that, fried this, fried that. Okay, people take a lot of sodas. All right, the sodas are very, very high in sugar. Okay, and they have a very deleterious effect on the heart. It can also predispose to hypertension, predispose to diabetes, predispose to obesity. Okay, many people don't take fruits and vegetables, which are very good. People will rather invest in taking soft drinks, all right, than buying fruits, banana, oranges. Yes, some people say, oh, they are quite expensive, but The sodas are also very expensive. Alcohol intake also alcohol is also very expensive. Alcohol beverages, whatever the one you take, whether the sodas or alcoholic beverages,
all right,
these are expensive stuff. Okay.
All right, doctor, because there's a lot to unpack. So I wanted to keep this for later, but let me ask it now. That has to do with what are the symptoms people are likely to feel whenever they have cardiovascular issue? Because it's not, I know it's common these days, but I don't think the symptom is like malaria and the rest of the things that we feel, and we can easily say without going to the hospital, which is not right, and go and do self-medication. Cardiovascular health issues, what are the symptoms to show that your heart is not in a very good place, and you should quickly check it out and do something as soon as possible?
Thank you very much for that question. Very important. The first thing I will say is this: cardiovascular abnormalities or pathologies can be completely asymptomatic. Completely asymptomatic. And that is why many people don't detect it on time. I mean, that is also the reason why it's called a silent killer. I mean, we've had people who've gone for board meeting, who've gone to the market, who have embarked on driving themselves to a meeting or the other and suddenly slumped. Now, the question is this: if that person was shivering and having very high fever, I'm sure he wouldn't embark on that particular activity. He will call in straight, move to the hospital. But because most of these things are asymptomatic, the person goes on with his or her activity, and before you know it, that person drops, and unfortunately, a life will be lost that way, leaving behind loved ones. That is one thing we must emphasize. And that takes me to this, that whether you have symptoms or not, please undergo regular cardiac checks. Okay, undergo regular, medical checkups, just, for the sake of it, to know whether you are good to go or not. Go for it at least once in a year. All right, and if you have risk factors, then do it much more frequently. If you are hypertensive, if you are diabetic, and the rest, do it more frequently. That's one. Number two, patients can have chest pain, exertional chest pain. So this person is walking up the staircase, and here comes this chest pain on the left or in the middle retrosternal point, either in the middle or on the left, and gripping in nature. Some will say at the time maybe dull in nature, but usually gripping in nature. All right. And then when the person stops that activity, the pain wanes. All right. Usually that is an herald of ischemic heart disease, angina coming in there. If nothing is done, it can become more frequent and become more prolonged. Usually it's few seconds to few minutes, but then it can become more frequent, more prolonged, and then the person will begin to have it even much more. Now, the worst part of it is that a very excruciating pain can come, all right, that will be so bad that the person will have this impending doom, will have a feeling of impending doom. Very, very, severe pain, crushing, gripping very tightly, and the person will feel like, oh goodness, life is ebbing away. That person can also start sweating profusely. There can be awareness of the heartbeat and all of that. Those are, are extreme cases, and heart attack is just by the corner, or it has even arrived at that point. All right. Other symptoms are palpitation, awareness of the heartbeat.
Right.
As I'm speaking to you now and you're listening, I'm sure that you are not aware that your heart is beating, but it is beating. Our heart is a silent worker. It does its work without, troubling anybody. All right. But when pressure gets to it, it can begin to do its work with a lot of stress, and then the person will get aware of each heartbeat. Sometimes patients will say, "Oh, my heart was running as if it wants to jump out." That is a major symptom, and that needs to be addressed quickly. For some other people, it's exertional breathlessness.
Right.
They walk up the staircase, they walk, just few distances, and then they have this very, very labored breathing, as if they just had a 100-meter dash. Okay, that is there as well, and that can increase, as time goes on, if the person does not do anything about it. The other thing is that the person may have difficulty in breathing when lying down. If the person lies down flat and there is difficulty in breathing, he needs to get propped up. The other one is, at the very height of it, the person is sleeping and suddenly wakes up gasping for air, air hunger, as if there's not enough air in the room. At that point, that person has really, really gone.
Well, Dr. Olusegun Joseph, let's quickly wind down on this one. We started off by talking about the predisposing factors, and we said in the 60s and the rest, we didn't have these issues. So when you hear that it's also as a result of genetics, you wonder who passed it on to this generation if the previous generation didn't have those issues. And this takes me to the point. In terms of research for either, the cause, the numbers, even the medication and treatment, how would you rate us here in Nigeria? I see a lot of figures. Sometimes we try to incorporate from out there, even the medications from out there, and you understand how these things work. The research and stuff will be for a different sample of population, but then we still use it here. So how would you rate research? And if we can do this in 30 seconds, Doctor.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Cardiovascular research is actually on the rise here. We have a lot of figures to show that cardiovascular disease is on the increase. Now, with regards to genetics, if a parent, either one or both, are hypertensive, diabetic, the chances of the offspring, having the same thing, because they have the same gene, is very high. All right, but that person may not come down with the cardiovascular, illness, may not come down with hypertension, for example, may not come down with diabetes, if the person chooses, a very, very, healthy lifestyle, and that will help that patient. So with research is on the increase. We've done 10 years, 15, 20, even in different parts of the country.
All right.
Cardiovascular disease have always stopped has always been on the lead with regards to mortality.
Now, one thing is clear, people need to pay more attention to their health, and we're hoping that this conversation will help in that regard. But we'll have to thank you so much, Dr. Akinsoye Olusegun Joseph, consultant physician and cardiologist, Luth. Thank you for your time and for giving us a free consultation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, that's what the morning brief is about, ensuring that you get the very best from life. But we have reactions from today's conversation and from yesterday, Jeffrey.
All right, so this is the immediate one from the conversation we had on our sports segment. I'm worried that we cannot depend on our own but hire foreign coaches all the time. I think the NFF owes us an explanation what's happening behind the scene. Who is Bruno in Wales football? That's from Jonah Kataps.
No, when we hired the Nigerian one, we know what happened. So take a look at what you had to say about the conversation yesterday on the age limit for admission into tertiary institutions. This user, Bamidele, says, age is not our challenge now. Fix the university system first so that a 4-year course takes 5 years and a 5-year course takes 5 years. Make the universities a holistic grooming place for young adults, he says.
All right, from Alex Linus, the decision of the federal government on age limits to higher education of learning will play a vital role and massively reduce the number of pupils, students jumping classes, especially primary schools to secondary schools.
All right, and we end with this SOS. It's a message from Felix in Abuja, and this is quite worrisome. This user says, I want to use this medium to call the attention of the FCT minister and the commissioner of police of the FCT to our plight. Armed robbers have been terrorizing our area for months now. This user says that it resides in Orozo in Amak Area Council, and they've been the ones providing security, waking up in the night to provide security, which is meant to be one of the sole responsibilities of government. Ends by saying the FCT minister should come to our aid because the entire area is under the siege of robbers that come in large numbers. So this is from Amak Area Council, Orzo. I hope I got that right, in the nation's capital, Abuja.
But that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and keep them coming. We'll continue to read them and amplify them. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma.
Don't forget, Sunrise Daily is next. So stay with Channels Television for all of your breaking stories. Do have a wonderful day. I'm Kayode Okikulu.